is the first ever episode of Plant Talk with Michael. And today we're starting off with a segment that we call What in the World, followed by our tip of the week from me, and then you're going to see what really rots my roots. And to close it out, we're going to look at a plant destination that you don't want to miss. Let's go ahead and get this started with a section we call What in the World, and I'm just going to put this photo up here so you can see what in the world is going on with this grass. There are obviously yellow human footprints left on this green grass. The homeowner has no idea. This one actually had me stumped and I had to research it. But if you think you know what caused this, I want you to pause this video and go comment down below. And then at the end of the video, I will let you know whether you're right or not. Now, each week when we do the show, we want to leave you with a great gardening tip. And this week is no exception. So let's go ahead and turn it over to Michael's tip of the week. For today's tip of the week, we're going to be talking about timing when it comes to planting seed indoors. So this is something that's really crucial because a lot of these crops that you're planting for vegetables, you really got to get the timing right or else you're not going to get good production. For example, with tomato plants, here in our part of the world, we like to get them outdoors around the end of March. Now on the seed packet, you will see that it says you need to plant the seeds indoors 6 to 8 weeks before you put them outdoors. So if you're planning on getting your tomatoes outdoors on time, then actually you're gonna have to be looking at the end of January to get your seeds planted indoors, and so it can really sneak up on you. So that's this week's tip, is think about what you're planting, think about when to start the seeds, if you're gonna start them from seeds and not a transplant. Now moving on to what really rots my roots. This week we're gonna talk about crepe murder, and that is when people cut the tops off of their crepe myrtle trees, which is unequivocally wrong. Don't do it. Let's talk about why. Crepe myrtle topping actually started happening many years ago because people thought that if you cut off all of the top growth, it would stimulate new fresh growth each year and therefore more blooms. And in a sense, yeah, it kind of does do that because whenever you cut off all of the top of the tree, it's forced to put new growth out the following year or else it's not gonna live. And what you'll notice is if you have cut off a crepe myrtle branch and you're left with this stump, the following year you'll get multiple new branches growing out of that one point. And each one of those new branches will grow and it will put a cluster of blooms on the end of it. And so for you, you might be thinking, yeah, that's a lot of new blooms that I'll get from this one point. But there's a few things wrong with this logic. Number one is it's really bad for the tree because that tree has to use a lot of energy to make all of those new branches, and each year you're cutting off all of that tree's hard work that it grew from the year before, and it has to put an output of excess energy, and you're just weakening the plant over time. The next problem is you are delaying your bloom time. So when you allow a crepe myrtle to just defoliate naturally and then the following year it puts new growth on the same wood that it had from the previous year, it can then concentrate on blooming sooner. Whenever you cut off all of those branches and force it to regrow each year, you're going to delay your blooms by about 6 weeks from when they would have showed up without cutting it. And because crepe myrtles are a re-blooming plant, meaning that they set blooms, drop them, and then bloom again, if you leave your crepe myrtles alone, you will actually get an entire cycle of blooms that the person who cuts them off will not get. The next problem is all that new growth that grows each year is going to be very weak because it's all coming off of a central point and it's going to have very weak branching structures, and it's forced to grow these long shoots that are going to be weak, and if you get rain on them or wind, they're going to be very prone to bending over or even snapping and breaking. Every professional horticulturist and expert on crepe myrtles agrees, do not cut the tops off of them for all of these reasons. Now, If you say, well, I do it because my crepe myrtles are too big and I need to cut them back each year, honestly, that plant is just too big for the spot that you have it planted, and you should consider just digging it up and getting rid of it, or digging it up and transplanting it to a new place where it has more room to grow. Now, as for why this practice is still so common all across the South, I think it's kind of a case of monkey see, monkey do, because people see other people cutting the tops off of their crepe myrtles and they think, oh, I must have to do that too. Or maybe it's just something that the landscapers do in order to charge for an extra service that's not really needed. And lastly, it looks super ugly whenever you cut those crepe myrtles off. I mean, what would you rather look at? Would you rather look at some gnarled twigs all winter long like this? Or would you rather look at a graceful and elegant small tree that tree crepe myrtles are that just happen to lose their leaves? But inevitably, whenever I post this type of content about not cutting the tops off of your crepe myrtles, all kinds of people show up in the comments trying to defend it. And if you're one of those people that thinks that's the right thing to do, you're wrong, and go ahead and bring it on in the comments. And now we're going to close this out on a positive note, and that brings us to plant destinations. For today's plant destination, we're going to go up to the Midwest to a place in Columbus, Ohio called Franklin Park Conservatory. Now, I know what you're thinking, Ohio sucks. Well, this part of Ohio does not suck. Let me tell you why. Each summer, Columbus hosts an event called Cultivate, where different garden centers and greenhouse growers get to go and look at all kinds of cool stuff and have seminars and all this. And they get to check out Franklin Park Conservatory, and it is an awesome place, and I don't like to miss it whenever I get a chance to go to Columbus. Now, what's so cool about Franklin Park is it is one of the oldest continuously operating gardens in the Western Hemisphere. I mean, this thing goes back to the 1800s, and it has this beautiful centerpiece of this glass greenhouse that was built in the late 1800s. And inside, it is just packed with incredible plants and specimens, including the largest fiddle leaf fig I have ever seen in person. It's also paired with some super stunning outdoor gardens and interactive exhibits that anyone from any age would love to see. And you never know what's going to be on display depending on what time of year it is. You might see a beautiful Chihuly glass sculpture, or you could see some bonsais that are hundreds of years old that have been on display. But if you're a plant person at all, it is definitely one that you should check out. Oh yeah, and for that what in the world from the beginning of the episode, let's take a closer look at what caused these mysterious footprints on this lawn. Now, my initial thoughts were maybe somebody had some type of chemical on the bottoms of their shoe. Maybe they were power washing the driveway or doing some painting or cleaning, and then they walked onto the grass and that chemically burned that grass, but that's actually not the answer. A really smart commenter posted that this is actually a lot more simple than that. This is just somebody walking on the grass when it's got frost on it. And it really makes sense because the grass is really flexible whenever it's not frozen, but if it's frozen or covered in frost and you go ahead and put weight on it, you could actually be crimping those individual blades of grass and cutting off water flow to them. And then that got me researching it, and I got to see that most golf courses actually will enforce what's called a frost delay in order to not ruin the greens on those golf courses. So you golfers may have already gotten that question right because you already knew that. All right, that is it for episode 1 of the very first Plant Talks. Hope you enjoyed it. There's gonna be more. Stay tuned next week.